So Misan, welcome to Upstream Livestream in the Super Union Studios.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Well, it's a great pleasure, Misan. So some of the people we've spoken to in this Upstream Livestream series come from brands that we might say are household names. I would say that what we see is a brand that is about to become a household name, but perhaps for those people that are not aware of what we see, you could give us a little synopsis of what it is that you do.
Absolutely, and thank you for recognizing our ascendancy, if you will. We are considered to be the leading and certainly the fastest growing digital first premium publishing house or network. We own a varied amount of Facebook, Instagram pages and websites that have a curated experience that take the noise of the internet away and deliver a engaging, purpose-driven experience on your internet connected device.
And that idea of curation is central to what you do, isn't it? There's a high quality threshold on what you do. It's not just content, it's content that you have judged to be the right kind of content that meets, as it were, a minimum standard. That's a really important part of what we see, as I understand.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we have some great stats, but our stats will probably be 10 times more if we had just published cat videos.
Yeah.
And that is not really in our DNA.
Yeah.
What we see was born out of a concern of the most popular content that is consumed on the news feeds that control most of the internet of this age. I strongly believe is content that history will not be kind to. And what we see was designed really from day one to see if people were happy consuming throwaway clickbait content or whether they were ready to spend time to stop their thumb scrolling on high quality, engaging content. And I'm very happy to report that it is not that people have bad taste, it is that they don't have time.
Right.
And we take the process of looking for great content away and curate an experience for them to enjoy.
There's almost a sort of public service element to it, right? You used the word purposeful
Yes.
earlier on, but there is a kind of a need you're satisfying there. As you say, people don't have time. They don't necessarily perhaps even have the sort of self-ability to edit or manage what they consume, right? So a big part of this is about how you give people the opportunity to access things that have been properly selected, properly curated on their behalf. Right?
Well, you just said it, what they consume. People say you are what you eat. And I strongly believe, and all of the team of What We See believe, that you are what you consume. And so many of the most important decisions in my own personal life have been guided by my sensory experience consuming music, film, and the arts as a young man. And I want to bottle that experience and distribute it to anyone with two things, an internet connection and an inquisitive mind.
It's very interesting, isn't it, how social media has then allowed you to make that jump from personal curation or curatorial ability or skill or taste, whatever you want to call it, and then project it out really fast into the future. I mean, that is quite a different journey to perhaps where we were before, where you had to rely on more linear, progressive ways of building reputation, building some kind of followship through conventional media. But you've really jumped fast into that. I mean, talk a little bit about the growth, some of the figures behind What We See, because I think it's incredible how fast you've grown and how you've built that so far.
So even before setting up What We See, one of the things that really came to my attention was a gentleman called Jonah Peretti, who, whilst working at Huffington Post, set up something called BuzzFeed. And what I realized about what Jonah proved almost before Facebook itself realized is that you could use a very small amount of actual human beings to reach billions of people digitally by finding content that created some form of an emotional reaction. And in many ways that went into the clickbait sphere, but it proves to me that delivering content was no longer only for the caretakers that you and I grew up with, which is terrestrial TV and satellite. And all those barriers have been broken down. So knowing that and the ability to almost manipulate algorithms by publishing content that people would engage with, we wanted to plug our taste standing on the shoulders of what BuzzFeed and other platforms had shown us. And that is a real difference. From the very beginning, we understood that we could reach a lot of people on Instagram and Facebook. We didn't feel we needed to rely just on a website. We love our website, but most of our reach is on social platforms. We understood what algorithms mean. You have to feed that algorithm. We post a video every hour, Monday to Sunday, and we have received a lot of organic growth because of the quality and variety of content we are publishing on our pages. So in 2 years, we've gone from 0 to 7 million followers across the network with over 2 billion organic video views and an average watch time of over 1 minute on Facebook, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there are many publishers that have, 8-second average view times. So we're very proud of the amount of time people are spending on our pages.
Yeah. Do you think it says something about the sort of next stage of evolution of social media and the web generally, about the way that your business has grown versus some of the other players that don't have that same degree of creative integrity, if you like, to what they're doing?
Well, you can't go to a conference without hearing curation. Before it was just, amplification, how many views can you get, how fast are you growing? But now people want to feel they're getting a more intimate, personal experience. And it's very, very hard for many of our peers, I wouldn't say competitors, to do that, because so much of their story has been built around just regardless of quality, how many people will click on this. Whereas our team, I all say this to our creative team, publish heart first. I also say this to brands, be a storyteller and publish heart first, because to make that thumb stop scrolling, it has to feel authentic.
Yeah. I mean, I talk a lot with our people within Super Union about the difference between what I'd call intrinsic motivation, so caring yourself enough about what you do, and then extrinsic motivation, which is paying attention to what people say they like. And I'm strongly of the opinion that the best work, the best ideas, the best creativity comes from that intrinsic motivation. You care enough about it yourself to push it harder and to drive up your standards. You're a truly global business. I mean, you've got very, very strong connections and business in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, across Europe and the Americas. How do you maintain that standard, though, when you're reaching? I mean, is that a challenge for you as you move forward to keep that same degree of curational integrity around what you do when the platform and the number of users gets bigger and bigger?
It's a challenge and an education process. So our archive business covers the Middle East, India, Sub-Saharan Africa. And initially we built that business with pictures, not videos, because we felt with the lack of data in some parts of the world, affordable data like we have in the first world, that pictures were easier to consume on their internet connected devices. And that's changing already, because data is becoming more readily available, and we're producing and posting more videos for those pages. But initially we found that pictures were getting more shares, more engagement in some parts of the world than video. Whereas here in the UK or North America, video is by far the most engaging medium. So, there are different nuances. And then heritage as well. So a lot of the content we publish on the archive businesses is looking at the recent history of a region, which sounds very simple, but it's an incredibly engaging thing to publish one's recent history without trying to sell anything.
And so differences in technology in the way that people can interact with content, right? You've touched on there, but in terms of what people actually want to see, do you think there are different ways in different parts of the world in which content is being made or is being displayed? How similar are we as a global population, and how different are we regionally, nationally? One of the big debates of our time, right, is the local versus global point of view.
Everyone loves a storyteller. We use this term in our deck called the virtual campfire. And that is our business, very similar to the stories handed down by our fathers and mothers of old, that make you do three things: learn, laugh, and cry. And that is really our war cry as a business. If you can make anyone, it doesn't matter whether they're in Mogadishu or in Paris, learn something, laugh, and be moved to cry, you're doing just fine. And that also is exactly what a brand needs to understand, is they have to be a storyteller. It doesn't matter whether you're LVMH or a local plumber. You have to become a storyteller because people do not have the attention and time to deal with anything else. You know, you have to make them pause. And that goes across all regions, whether it's languages, cultural nuances. Be a storyteller. We just published a video on our India archive page, which is for it's the Indian Head Injury Foundation, which is a movement that is helping people that have been in serious head injuries, and you know, got over 2.4 million views organically. Wow. And that made us realize the reach and power you can have across the world without trying to be too selly.
And you're bringing in content from various different sources. You're not producing a lot of that content yourself. You're encouraging other people to come to you with that content. How does that relationship work, and how do you see the relationship between content creators and content publishers in the world?
That's almost a little bit of our own superpower, if you like, is we have the 80-20 model. Where 80% of all the content is curated and 20% is original. We did this because we realized that even if we raised a huge amount of money just to make original content, it would never be as good as the best content makers on the internet. When I say content makers, we have no real interest in amplifying influencers and YouTubers. They're doing very well by themselves. We reach out to the people who maybe pay their rent doing a BMW advert, and then they do their passion projects by flying off to Patagonia to do a beautiful 7-minute short. It does a festival circuit and ends up in one place, pretty much rotting, Vimeo. So we reached out to that network of filmmakers, and because of the large organic reach, we've leaned into them, and we're now sent more videos that we could ever publish on our network of pages. It is very, very important for people that are more talented than you and I in making great content to be amplified and be seen. And that is one of the reasons. You asked earlier why we've grown so fast, because when you go on What We See, every other post is something you've never seen anywhere else. And it's of a quality that, you know, we wouldn't be able to make ourselves with the best will in the world.
Yeah. Do you think there's a case that that organizations, whether they're media organizations or businesses or brands, have been a little bit too focused in some ways on the kind of commercial imperative behind their business, not enough on the quality of the content there? I mean, it almost seems like this demand was always there for great storytelling, great content, just never really had its home because everyone was focused on, you know, maybe trying to sell stuff a bit too much.
Well, every consumer knows you're trying to take money off them. So you don't need to tell them that. You don't need to push them to any specific place for them to dip into their wallet. A great example is John Lewis. You know, John Lewis have been so successful in their yearly Christmas video. And if you watch any of those videos, they are short films. No one's flogging a sofa in it. And some would say that the English Christmas hasn't even started until we have seen the next John Lewis video. And that is a successful piece of branded content by telling a story.
I love the fact that you call it a Christmas film and not an ad, actually.
It's and I think John Lewis themselves would never use the A word in that process.
But which it's an interesting trajectory, isn't it, for communication or for, you know, the relationship between an organization and its audiences to go down if it thinks more along the lines of content that people enjoy rather than trying to sell stuff and formularizing the message in some ways. I mean, that's obviously something that you'd see changing and adapting.
Well, it's a big part of what I believe is the DNA of Superunion. Is, you know, a company feels they're a little bit poorly in how they're perceived publicly, and they yield at your throne to ask
well,
for your
not quite
help.
necessarily, but yeah.
And you have a look at why maybe a brand that has existed for 80 to 100 years is not somewhat relevant in this age. And a lot of it is to retell their story in a way that maybe from the inside looking out, a marketing team at one of your clients would really struggle to see that, you know.
I think, well, it's interesting. I mean, I'd say my point of view on the value that we add is we often help organizations to really understand themselves actually a lot better than perhaps it's possible to do when you're at the rock face day in, day out. But I think then the translation of that understanding into how you then present that to the outside world and to the many different audience groups that you have, which is obviously not just consumers, but wide and varied. Is then once you've established that central DNA, how does that present itself in different ways? Which is where I think what you're doing is particularly interesting, because being able to align yourself with content and some form of expression that's consistent with your brand, but not necessarily overtly about your brand, is really interesting. I mean, that's a lot of what you do with brands, as I understand it as well, right? Just to help them show up in the world among like-minded type of pieces of content or like-minded experiences.
I'll give you an example. We're working right now with a premium whiskey brand, and the whiskey is blended 4 times, and 4 is the pillar of the story they're trying to tell the world. So they've let us be creative with it, and we found a leading director, leading actress, and we're actually making a film with 4 rooms that are all interconnected with 4 different stories, and very little from the outside looking in to do with whiskey. And the finished result would be a Netflix quality experience that will very much speak of the heritage of this premium whiskey brand in a way that maybe they wouldn't have been able to quite come up with.
No, it's nice. So the communication, if you like, around the brand becomes associative rather than overt in many ways.
And we can do that, and then with our network of owned and operated social media pages and websites, we then distribute it as well, which is the advantage we have. We can come in and work with companies like yourselves in understanding what a brand wants to do online, and maybe be very honest in who they are today online. And if and when there is a need to tell their story, we can distribute that in a non-contrived way.
And do you see this more and more becoming the way that brands or organizations should be communicating, should be orientating their marketing, if you like, and their plans is more around content, more around being a part of a fabric, if you like, of experiences, as opposed to about this more transactional kind of selling type mechanism that they've historically been associated with? I mean, I find that really interesting as a direction.
If you're on Instagram or a website or Facebook and you see something that is clearly 98% interested in extracting the pound and dollar from you with very much else, unless it's a bullseye shot and it's something at that moment that you just want or need, you're going to switch off. So brands have to find a way to hold your attention, have their DNA be seen by the consumer in a way that maybe they haven't done in the past. There's a reason why so many global brands have such low engagement on social media pages. They have been using Facebook and Instagram really as a traffic referral engine for sales. And the kingdom, if you like, of Mr. Zuckerberg doesn't want you to do that. You have to use Facebook as a place for it to be your home of your brand, not just a place to take the consumer eyeball to a website where you can make a transaction. And we are very much aligned to that. We will help tell your brand story, and the results of telling your brand story will mean the consumer will feel more comfortable when he or she feels like it to spend money with you. And it's a difficult thing to tell that to a CMO who wants results as soon as possible.
Well, of course they do, but I mean, it's what you measure, isn't it? And that way, in some, I mean, the measurement in terms of audience reach that you have, the degree of engagement that people have is a strong measure. It may just not be as directly tied to specific actions.
And we'll say no. I mean, one of the things we're already known for is saying no. So if a client wants us to put links everywhere, taking them to our beloved customer base to a place to spend a lot of money without necessarily having any real story, I mean, we won't do that.
Yeah. It's the strongest word in the creative lexicon, isn't it? No.
No.
The things you won't do to find. But how do you manage that? I'm interested in that because it's a hard word to say, isn't it? I mean, are there points that how much debate do you have to have about what you do or what you won't do, or how clear are you about where the boundaries are in that kind of
I can't say the name of the now clients, but they came up with a idea of a bottle for us to promote, and with respect to them, and I openly said this to the whole marketing team, is that everyone knows it's a bottle. What does that bottle stand for? So we initially refused to publish the first piece of content that they asked us to do, and then we worked on making a short film about, again, their heritage and why people want to drink what they make. It's a big difference between your product and your story. We are here for your story, and that will lead people to your product. That's the way you go. It's not product and then story. That's just our view on it.
Yeah. And that notion of why is central to storytelling.
Yes.
I think, I mean, that's the important thing for organizations to be clear about today, in your view, is why, and real meaning, real reason. And what about sort of relationship between emotional resonance and kind of rational resonance? I mean, where are you on that? Is it all emotion in what you're doing, and less about the rational argument, or how do those things?
Well, I think they're actually good bedfellows, and we all say we don't like to insult the intelligence of anyone that's spending time on our platform, so they can decide for themselves what they do once we make them feel something, and if that is to continue spending time with us, or then going to buy that car, or that amazing piece of jewelry, or the holiday, we leave it to them to make that decision. One thing I will say is that the level of engagement and reach that we give brands is pretty much on a different stratosphere from when they have tried to have the same conversation with the potential or existing customer as us. Our case studies have been very, very interesting to run through, and we've spoken about this.
It is amazing. I mean, I'd encourage anybody to have a look at that, with you more closely if they're interested, because some phenomenal stats around how that does perform. It's also true that you sit in quite a complex ecosystem, really, don't you, between the platforms and the technology companies, the content creators, the brands, the agencies, etc. And that notion of partnerships and sort of interconnectedness feels really important there. Yes. I mean, how do you see all that evolving? What is the future of that? People talk a lot about, Facebook and what's positive and what's perhaps less so, and with so many others. Where are we headed? What's the...
Well, it's been, for us, from the agency side, it's been somewhat swimming upstream initially, because we're stubborn with how one sells and what we see. Customer first, consumer first for us. So we're not particularly huge fans of ad tech. So we have no programmatic, any kind of pre-roll, any of that on any of our assets. We publish native video content that to our consumer doesn't look any different to what they're already used to seeing. And that helps us get the engagement rates that we get. Now, because we are a publishing house that sits on Facebook and Instagram, platforms we do not own, and the web. But the web is, I think, for anyone, a lot less engaging in terms of raw traffic. It's a very, very interesting time to balance where we are going in the future. And what I would say about Facebook is that, imagine being a headmaster of a school of over 2 billion people. A lot of mistakes are happening. It is maturing as a business. There are many things that we've had to do as a publisher. All of our editors have to prove where they are located. They have to send photo ID. You have to get special passes to do political adverts if that's what you do as a publisher. None of this was happening 6 months ago. So there is a big change in that. I'm also very excited about WhatsApp. I do not work for Facebook, but I have a feeling that WhatsApp is going to be a very, very useful tool for publishers like us in the next 18 months. If you look at what WeChat has done over the last decade, where people get mortgages on a messaging app. So I'm very, very interested to see what Mr. Zuckerberg and his team are going to do with WhatsApp as a way to have, for brands and publishers to have conversations with an incredibly intimate experience. I think a messaging app that is on everyone's phone is very, very different from Instagram and Facebook. So we'll see what they build for us to do with that platform.
But it's very much about how you create together as you move forward.
Yes.
It's not about, I mean, it's embrace, don't fight in these situations, and travel forward together as partners.
I mean, people are quick to attack Twitter, Instagram, and definitely Facebook. And I always say, where is the reach at the moment? The majority of time spent online is on the unicorn social media networks of this age. And I don't think that's going away anytime soon. The great thing about what we see is if someone very smart creates a new network or a new platform, the experience we've built wasn't built for any specific platform. So we can take it into augmented reality, into virtual reality, whatever new thing. People want to have high quality, engaging stories. So we're very comfortable with being able to plonk the What We See experience on any new way that people are deciding to consume content. Yeah,
plonk is a great technical term,
right? I love
it. No, very good. I mean, is there anything you do see emerging as technology platforms that aren't? You mentioned augmented reality that kind of sparkled and fizzled a few years ago. Hasn't quite sort of moved beyond sparkle and fizzle.
I mean, I think live streaming is still in its infancy, and you've seen with what's happening with Twitch and other gaming platforms of how live streaming games have just exploded. I think people are voyeurs, if you like, and even with us, we can pull out our phone and live stream a busker at Waterloo Station that will get 2 million views. And we could go to a record label who spent millions making a music video that will get less views than that. People like to feel like they are almost kind of sneaking up and experiencing something that is truly, truly intimate. So I think the intimacy of the internet is a big part of our future. I think gaming is also in its infancy. I mean, the Fortnite, the huge growth of gaming leagues and e-gaming is just the beginning. I think gaming is going to branch out of just for millennials, and we've just launched our What We See Gaming, but not trying to copy what everyone else is doing. I am 41 years old, so as a founder, our gaming is based on nostalgia. And it has exploded in growth. We're doing articles on, I don't know if you remember things like Double Dragon and Tekken.
I'm 53, so I can remember further back than that.
There you go, and it's actually our fastest growing page. So we're getting men and women aged 35 to 55 that are reliving their youth, talking about when they actually would save up their pennies and go to the arcade machine. A completely different experience on gaming than playing Fortnite.
Well, because it was an immersive content experience, really, wasn't it? In that sense, it's somewhere you could go, lose yourself for a while, and engage with something, and that's quite interesting. And do you see the way that people are consuming content fundamentally changing? I mean, we've talked about this a little already, but if you give people access to a higher standard of creative content, if you like, do you see that changing the way they consume, or is this something people have always done but in other ways? I mean, they went to the cinema, right? Or they watched great Netflix shows or great Amazon Prime shows. But does this mark a shift in the way that people are behaving with content?
I think it's a really important time. It's a gift and a curse, the internet of this age. And the gift is that we can democratize the same experience that was only really for very privileged people that had this sort of access, that they could get that level of high quality content. And now those barriers are completely down. And that can mean that you can educate yourself using the internet in a way that you couldn't before. So, when I commute in every morning, I love sort of having a bit of a nose and seeing when you're standing up and seeing what people are spending time on. And you do see people on the Daily Mail just kind of blindly, enjoying whatever the mail is throwing at them. But you also see that people are looking for much more curated experiences. I see a lot more people that are clearly deep into an episodic podcast. So there's a huge explosion in podcasts. We're in talks with Apple at the moment on launching our first podcast, which is really having discussions with interesting people like your good self, sir, asking, what film and what song have shaped who you are. So I believe that's the direction people are heading, where they look for intimate experiences on their internet-connected devices, on Facebook, on Apple Music, on Spotify. They're going to use the same platforms because that's where the scale is,
right,
but find a more intimate experience within that platform. What we see, for example, is extremely popular on Instagram and Facebook, but it feels like an intimate experience. Yes, we're building an app. Yes, we're going to have offline events, but if you want to reach people at scale, you have to go to where that traffic is. It does not mean that it has to be a mass market experience, even if at scale. People make that mistake. If it's at scale, it has to be low rent. Absolutely not.
Well, but it is really interesting, isn't it, to have that almost feel like sort of conflicting notions, which is truly global scale and truly personal intimacy at the content level. But they're not in any way, shape or form incompatible, right? No. They're part and parcel of the same thing.
If we had an imaginary speaker that Mr. Zuckerberg decided to plug into every single person that had Facebook, I don't know how many it is now, well over 2 billion, and we played them Taylor Swift, arguably the most popular pop star on earth, I would say quite a lot of people may enjoy Taylor. But what I would also say, if what we see curated that and we put on some Joni Mitchell or some Nina Simone, that many of the people would probably never have heard of, they will be lifted to another place. And that is a responsibility of having huge reach. We've built this huge reach, and as long as I'm involved in this business, we have to fight to make sure we raise the quality of content that people consume.
I think that's fantastic. So Misan, thanks so much for joining us on Upstream Livestream. Been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.